Imagine standing on a dusty hilltop in southeastern Turkey, watching as a team of archaeologists carefully brush away the soil from something that should not exist. Something that no textbook, no theory, no carefully constructed model of human history has any business being there. And as the dirt falls away, there it is. A stone face. A human face. Carved 12,000 years ago, embedded horizontally inside a wall, staring up at the sky it has not seen in over 100 centuries. Not displayed. Not placed on a pedestal. Entombed. Deliberately. Like something that was meant to stay hidden forever. Welcome to hushed history. And I want you to find a place where you can fully relax and let the outside world fade away into the background as you get comfortable for the story I am about to share with you today. Because this story begins not with an answer, but with a question that keeps getting harder to answer the more we dig. Quite literally. The hill had been there for as long as anyone could remember. Local farmers in southeastern Turkey called it Potbelly Hill. They knew it was littered with stones, assumed it was a medieval cemetery, and left it at that. In 1963, researchers from Istanbul and Chicago universities surveyed it briefly, read their notes, and moved on. Nothing remarkable, they concluded. They were wrong. It was not until the 1990s that a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt looked again, this time with a different set of questions in mind. And what he found beneath that unremarkable mound would go on to rewrite the oldest chapter of the human story. Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known temple complex, and quite possibly its oldest mystery. The site sits in the Jurmas Mountains, roughly 15 kilometers from the modern city of Şanlıurfa in southeastern Turkey, not far from the Syrian border. The landscape is dry and bone pale. The kind of place that holds secrets well. And what Schmidt's team began pulling from the earth was staggering. Massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some of them rising over 5.5 meters tall, some weighing as much as 10 tons. circular and oval enclosures, their surfaces carved with animals, predators, abstract symbols, and scenes that seem to carry a weight of meaning we have not yet fully decoded. Scorpions, vultures, foxes. A headless human figure crouching beneath an enormous scorpion. And one particular pillar, Pillar 43 in Enclosure D, that may be the most extraordinary single piece of carved stone in all of human history. We will come back to that. Here is what made Göbekli Tepe a genuine shock when it was discovered, and what still makes it deeply unsettling to anyone willing to sit with its implications. According to radiocarbon dating, the oldest parts of this site were constructed around 12,000 years ago. That is roughly 6,000 years before Stonehenge. 7,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. We are talking about a period when human beings had no writing, no pottery, no metal tools, no wheels, and according to everything we thought we knew, no capacity to coordinate and build something like this. Because that is the thing. This was not built by a small family group. The pillars had to be quarried from limestone bedrock using nothing but flint tools. They had to be transported from quarry sites, shaped with extraordinary precision, erected, and carved with imagery of remarkable complexity. The logistical effort implied by all of this points to hundreds. Possibly thousands of people working together with a shared purpose and a shared vision that carried them across years, perhaps generations. And the established wisdom of archaeology at the time said that was simply impossible for the era. The old model ran like this. First came agriculture. Then came settled communities. Then came social complexity. Then came religion, ritual, and monumental architecture. That was the sequence. That was the story every textbook told. Göbekli Tepe does not fit that sequence. It obliterates it. The people who built this site were, as far as the evidence tells us, hunter-gatherers, pre-agricultural, mobile. And yet they came together somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 years ago to build something that demanded the kind of social coordination and collective vision that we thought only fully developed civilization could produce. Which raises a question that has haunted researchers ever since. Which came first? Did farming create the conditions for temples? Or did the drive toward a shared sacred space push people to settle, to grow, to become what we now call civilization? Schmidt himself, before his death in 2014, argued it was the latter, that the temple came before the farm. That religion, or something we might cautiously call it, was not a product of civilization, but its very seed. Let us talk about what we have learned since, because this is where it gets interesting in ways that even Schmidt did not live to see. Roughly 90% of Göbekli Tepe remains underground. Archaeologists estimate it may take another 150 years to fully excavate. At least 15 more stone enclosures are believed to lie buried beneath the surface. And at least one of those enclosures, according to researchers at University, may date back as far as 15,000 years before the present. That would push the origins of this place into a period when the last ice age was still loosening its grip on the northern hemisphere. 15,000 years ago. Before any civilization we have a name for. Before any framework we have confidently drawn. And then, in September of 2025, the excavation team led by archaeologist announced a discovery that brought the global archaeological community to a standstill. Between enclosures B and D, sealed inside a chamber wall, researchers found a human statue, 12,000 years old, lying horizontally, head and torso clearly defined, feet missing. But what stopped people was not the statue itself. It was the placement. This was not carved onto a surface as decoration. This was not placed inside the room to be seen. The figure had been built into the fabric of the wall itself, embedded, entombed. orientation, the deliberate horizontal positioning within the stone, led archaeologists to conclude this was ceremonial, perhaps a guardian figure, perhaps a votive offering, perhaps something for which we do not have a satisfying word yet. Two years earlier, a life-sized wild boar statue had been uncovered in Enclosure D. But this was different. This was a human face, sealed in darkness by the same hands that built the wall around it, and the people who did it knew exactly what they were doing. Which brings us back to Pillar 43. Because this is the stone that refuses to let researchers sleep. The pillar is covered in imagery. A vulture with what appears to be a large sphere balanced on its outstretched wing. Scorpions, a headless human body beneath them. Abstract geometric markings running across the central portion. V-shaped carvings, square carvings. For years, those geometric symbols were treated as decorative background noise behind the more dramatic animal carvings. In 2024, a researcher named Dr. Sweatman at the University of Edinburgh published a study in the peer-reviewed journal Time and Mind that reframed those symbols entirely. Sweatman argued that the V-shaped carvings are not decoration at all. They are a counting system. And what they are counting, he proposed, is time. Lunar months plus 11 additional days, forming a lunisolar calendar that tracks the cycles of both the sun and the moon simultaneously. If correct, that would make the carvings on Pillar 43 the oldest known calendar in human history. By roughly 6,000 years. The next oldest complex calendar system we know of is from a site called Warren Field in Scotland, dating to around 8,000 years before the Common Era. Göbekli Tepe would predate it by 2 full millennia. But Sweatman goes further, and this is where the theory becomes almost impossible to look away from. He argues the calendar was not simply a practical counting device. It was a memorial, a stone record of a specific date. And that date, encoded using positions of constellations visible at that time of year points to approximately 10,850 years before the Common Era. Which is, according to a growing body of physical evidence, the approximate date of what researchers call the Younger Dryas impact event. This is a proposed cosmic event thought to have involved a swarm of comet fragments striking or airburst detonating across the northern hemisphere, triggering a period of catastrophic global cooling that lasted over 1,000 years. The evidence for this event is real, though it remains debated in mainstream science. Concentrations of platinum and nanodiamonds, materials consistent with a large-scale impact or airburst, have been identified in soil sediments from North America and Greenland. Evidence of extensive biomass burning has been found in lakes within a few hundred kilometers of Göbekli Tepe itself, with radiocarbon dates compatible with that same window of time. There was also an airburst event documented around 150 kilometers south of Gobekli Tepe that appears to have destroyed one of the world's first known villages at Abu Huraira. If Sweatman is right, the people who carved Pillar 43 lived through, or in the immediate shadow of, a catastrophe the likes of which no living human being has ever witnessed. Something fell from the sky and cracked the world. It may have killed vast numbers of large animal species. Triggered 1,000 years of climate disruption severe enough to force a fundamental transformation in how human beings found food and organized themselves. And those people carved a record of it into 10-ton limestone, so permanent and so precise that it survived 12,000 years underground, waiting for someone to read it. It must be said plainly that not all archaeologists share Sweatman's interpretation. Critics argue that reading a counting system into the V-shaped carvings is speculative, that the proposed link to the Younger Dryas impact is not proven, and that the enthusiasm alone. But the conversation is happening at the highest levels of the field, and it is showing no signs of going away. What is beyond dispute is that the builders of Göbekli Tepe were watching the sky obsessively. The astronomical alignments noted across multiple enclosures, the celestial imagery carved throughout the site, the sheer care invested in tracking the movements of stars and constellations, all of it points to a people who understood the sky as something that governed them. A people possibly shaped by something they had witnessed fall from it. And then there is the question that arguably matters more than any other. Why did they bury it? Around 8,000 years before the Common Era, the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe were deliberately filled in, not abandoned to weather and time, not destroyed by enemies, filled in by the people who used them. Broken tools and animal bones were packed into the chambers alongside soil and rubble, layered up with such thoroughness that the tallest pillars were completely covered. The carvings, preserved with extraordinary care inside that fill, survived precisely because they were sealed rather than left exposed. Whoever buried Göbekli Tepe understood what they were doing. And they did it on purpose over what appears to have been a deliberate, incremental process. The most widely accepted explanation is ritual closure. Sacred spaces across many cultures and time periods have been ceremonially retired when their purpose was considered complete. The burial may have been a way of honoring the site, sealing its power rather than allowing it to decay without dignity. Others point to social transformation, suggesting that as communities moved toward agriculture and settled life, the old ceremonial order was deliberately set aside, decommissioned by a society that was becoming something entirely new. Some researchers, drawing on comparisons with later sacred traditions from other cultures, have proposed that the site was buried to contain it, that whatever power or presence was understood to reside in those carvings was considered dangerous if encountered by the uninitiated. And none of those explanations are mutually exclusive. All of them may be true at once, in the way that deeply human decisions tend to carry more than one reason inside them. What is perhaps most extraordinary of all is this. The same people, or their immediate descendants, who built a structure so magnificent that it would survive 12 millennia underground, chose to bury it themselves. Not because they were conquered, not because they forgot. They sealed it, and then they left. And the hill sat there through the Bronze Age, through the rise of Greece and Rome, through the birth of every religion and empire and language that defines the modern world, unremarkable, a slight rise in an already dusty landscape, holding everything it knew in silence. Until 1994. Until one man read the soil differently than everyone before him and asked what was underneath. Today, Göbekli Tepe is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, inscribed in 2018. Turkish government's Stone Hills project, known as tepeler, is coordinating excavations across more than 10 related Neolithic sites in the surrounding region, including Karahan, where equally astonishing stone enclosures continue to emerge from the earth. Over 200 specialists from more than 36 international institutions are working across these sites, mapping ancient landscapes, tracing the connections between hilltop centers and slowly, carefully trying to reconstruct a world that deliberately hid itself from us. In February of 2026, a major international exhibition titled Myths in Stone opens at Berlin's James Simon Gallery of the Near East Museum, bringing 96 artifacts from the site to European audiences for the first time. Because the world has not stopped being pulled toward that hill. And the hill has not stopped giving up its secrets, one brushstroke at a time. 12,000 years of silence, ended by a question that the more we answer, the deeper it goes. kind of investigation you want to follow as it unfolds, then I want to gently encourage you to take a moment right now and press that like button and consider subscribing to Hushed History. It is the single most direct way you can ensure that these investigations continue and that the next discovery, the next layer pulled back from the earth, finds its way to you before it finds anyone else. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay curious.